Because understanding great literature is better than trying to read and understand yet another business book. On the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, we commit to reading, dissecting, and analyzing the great books of the Western canon. You know, those books, from Jane Austen to Shakespeare, and everything else in between that you might have fallen asleep trying to read in high school. We do this for our listeners, the owner, the entrepreneur, the manager, or the civic leader who doesn't have the time to read, dissect, analyze, and leverage insights from literature to execute leadership best practices in the confusing and chaotic postmodern world we all now inhabit. Welcome to the rescuing of Western civilization at the intersection of literature and leadership. Welcome to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast. Hello, my name is Hassan Sorrells, and this is the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast, episode number 116. With our play today, one of the greatest playwrights of all time. As a matter of fact, when I say his name, you're going to go, oh, yeah, of course. This is a story that maximizes certain themes that still resonate today in our postmodern world. Themes of secrecy, political machinations, romance, and of course, the desire for power, along with a heavy dose of the mystical. Written in the early 17th century, as the days of North American seafaring-based exploration and colonialism were just starting to ramp up, this play, which opens up with a sea voyage a la Moby Dick, converges eventually on a prison island. Intrigue and suspense rule the day. Today, as we cover The Tempest by William Shakespeare, kicking off our month of August here on the podcast. Leaders, there is no difference between the use of spells and magic to acquire power in the past and the use of spells and magic of political propaganda to acquire power in the present. And we pick up with Shakespeare's The Tempest. We're going to be reading, as we usually do, from the Folger Shakespeare Library version of The Tempest. You can get that online for free. Edited by Barbara A. Melwatt and Paul Weirstein. And we do like the Folger Productions, the Folger Shakespeare Library Productions here on the podcast. They are extremely useful, extremely well written. The translations are very, very good. And they actually, the language is very, very clean and very clear. And of course, it gives you some great textual introductions to give you some background on what you're reading in the play. So we're going to start off with The Tempest, Act 1, Scene 1. A tempestuous noise of thunder and lightning is heard. Enter shipmaster and a boatswain. Master, boatswain! Boatswain, here, master, what cheer? Master, good, speak to the mariners. Fall to your yardly, or we run ourselves aground. Bestir, bestir! He exits. Enter mariners. Boatswain, hi, my heart, cheerily, cheerily, my heart, yar, yar, take in the topsail, and the master's whistle, blow till thou burst thy wind, if room enough. Enter Alonzo, Sebastian, Antonio, Ferdinand, Gonzalo, and others. Alonzo, good boatswain, have care, where is the master? Play the men. Boatswain, I pray thee now, keep below. Where is the master, boatswain? That was Antonio. Boatswain, do you not hear him? You mar our labor. Keep to your caverns. You do assist the storm. Gonzalo, nay, good, be patient. Boatswain, when the sea is. Hence, who cares these roars for the name of the king? To cabin, silence, trouble us not. Gonzalo, good, yet remember whom thou hast aboard. Boatswain, none that I love more than myself. You are a counselor. If you can command these elements to silence and work the peace of the present, we will not hand a rope more. Use your authority. If you cannot, give thanks that you have lived so long, and make yourself ready in your cabin for the mischance of the hour, if it so hap. Cheerily, good hearts, out of our way, I say. He exits. Gonzalo, I have great comfort from this fellow. Methinks he hath no drowning mark upon him. His complexion is perfectly gallows. Stand fast, good fate, to his hanging. Make the rope of his destiny our cable, for our doth little advantage. If he be not born to be hanged, our case is miserable. He exits with Alonso, Sebastian, and the other courtiers. Enter the boatswain. Boatswain, down with the topmast! Yar, lower, lower, bring her try with the main course! A cry within. A plague upon this howling! They are louder than the weather in our office. Enter Sebastian, Antonio, and Gonzalo. Yet again? What do you hear? Shall we go o'er and drown? Have you a mind to sink? Sebastian, a pox on your throat, you bawling, blasphemous, and charitable dog. Boatswain, work you then. Antonio, hang, cur, hang, you whoreson, insolent noisemaker. We are less afraid to be drowned than thou art. Gonzalo, I'll warrant him for drowning, though the ship were no stronger than a nutshell, and is as leaky as an unstanched wench. Boatswain, lay her a hold, set her 2 courses, off to sea again, lay her off. Enter more mariners, wet. Mariners, all lost, to prayers, all lost. Mariners exit. Boatswain, what must our mouths be cold? Gonzalo, the king and prince at prayers. Let's assist them, for our case is as theirs. Sebastian, I am out of patience. Antonio, we are merely cheated of our lives by drunkards. This wide-chopped rascal, would thou mightest lie drowned in the washing of 10 tides. The boatswain exits. Gonzalo, he'll be hanged yet, though every drop of water swear against it and gape and wits to glut him. A confused noise within. Mercy on us, we split. Farewell, my wife and children. Farewell, brother, we split. Antonio, let us all sink with the king. Sebastian, let's take leave of him. He exits with Antonio. Gonzalo, now I would give 1,000 furlongs of sea for an acre of barren ground. Long heath, brown furs, anything. The wills above be done. But I would fain die a dry death. Yeah, and thinking about it, I'd rather die a dry death too. Look, the Tempest opens, as you can hear from that piece there in Act 1, Scene 1. It opens on a ship that is in danger of running aground in the midst of, well, a storm or a tempest. The Tempest was written, like I said, in the opening, in the early 17th century, as the days of sea building and ship exploration were occurring, as England, Spain, the Dutch, and many other European colonists were beginning to actively explore what they called the New World. The sea was a powerful natural force, and it was a powerful natural force in the human imagination for much of human history. Rivers, lakes, streams, these were all considered to be navigable waterways, but the sea was a monster, and the sea had power. The sea had power to hide things. The sea had power to shape the world. There are deserts everywhere in fiction, from the deserts of water to the deserts of sand. And these types of deserts and this type of thinking that human beings tend to bring to their interactions with the natural world have mostly in our time been abrogated by our industrial technology and our ability to wrangle and overcome nature, our ability to put the sea in a box by traveling over it like a bird in the air. Ambitious young men throughout Europe in the 17th century, though, looked at the sea as something that could be tamed, something that was worthy of being tamed. As a matter of fact, something that was worthy of being whipped into shape. And Shakespeare wrote The Tempest against this backdrop of sea exploration, and that's one of the key themes in The Tempest. This call
that was high in the minds of ambitious young men all throughout Europe. This call to wrangle the sea allowed Shakespeare to build certain other themes into the Tempest. Themes of political power, themes of romance, themes that seemed almost mystical. By the way, there was a heavy dose of mysticism associated with seafaring and sea exploration, as well as a heavy dose of mysticism associated with the new discoveries in a world that European eyes had not laid upon. A world full of what people would later call Indians, with new animals, new plants, new trees, and a vast continent that seemed virginal and empty and ready, well, ready to be explored by ambitious young men who had the guts to go and wrangle everything they could from the natural world. One of the problems, of course, with exploring the natural world is that the natural world isn't empty. There's animals, there's plants, there's natural elements. And then, of course, there might be other people. We're going to go back to the Tempest here. We're going to pick up with Act 1, Scene 2, speaking of other people. And we want to introduce a couple of denizens of the island that the ship that we opened with, that was in the Tempest, is about to run aground upon. An island that is not empty, an island that is occupied, by at least one resentful person. Back to the Tempest, Act 1, Scene 2. Enter Prospero and Miranda. Miranda, if by your art, my dearest father, you have put the wild waters in this roar, allay them. The sky, it seems, would pour down stinking pitch. By that sea, mounting to the weak welkin's cheek, dashes the fire out. Oh, I have suffered with those that I saw suffer. A brave vessel, who had no doubt some noble creatures in her, dashed all to pieces. Oh, the cry did knock against my very heart. Poor souls, they perished. Had I been any god of power, I would have sunk the sea within the earth, or should the ship so have swallowed, and the frotting souls within her. Prospero, be collected. No more amazement, tell your piteous heart there's no harm done. Miranda, oh, woe the day. Prospero, no harm. I have done nothing but in care of thee, my dear one, thee, my daughter, who art ignorant of what thou art, not knowing of whence I am, nor that I am more better than Prospero, master of a full poor cell, and thy no greater father. Miranda, more to know, did never meddle with my thoughts. Prospero, 'tis time. I should inform thee farther. Lend thy hand and pluck my magic garment from me. Putting aside his cloak. So, lie there, my art, wipe thou thine eyes, have comfort. The dire spectacle of the rack, which touched the very virtue of compassion in thee, I have, with such provisions in mine art, so safely ordered that there is no soul, no, not so much as perdition as an hair, betide to any creature in the vessel, which thou heardest cry, which thou sawest sink. Sit down, for thou now must know farther, they said. Miranda, you have often begun to tell me what I am, but stopped, and left me to a bootless inquisition, concluding, stay, not yet. Prospero, the hour's now come. The very minute bids thee ope thy ear. Obey, and be attentive. Canst thou remember a time before we came unto this cell? I do not think thou canst, for then thou wast not out 3 years old. Miranda, certainly, sir, I can. Prospero, by what? By any other house or person, of anything the image tell me that, hath kept within thy remembrance? Miranda, 'tis far off, and rather like a dream than an assurance, that my remembrance warrants. Had I not 4 or 5 women once that tended me? Prospero, thou hadst and more, Miranda, but how is it that thou livest this in thy mind? What seest thou else in the dark, backward in abysm of time? If thou rememberest aught ere thou camest here, how thou camest here thou mayest. Miranda, but that I do not. Prospero. 12 years since, Miranda, 12 years since, thy father was the Duke of Milan and a prince of power. Miranda. Sire, are you not my father? Prospero. Thy mother was a piece of virtue, and she said thou wast my daughter, and thy father was the Duke of Milan, and his only heir, and no princess worse issued. Miranda. Oh, heavens, what foul play had that we had come from thence! Oh, blessed was that we did. Prospero. Both, my girl, by foul play, as thou sayest it, we were heaved thence, but blessedly hop hither. Miranda. Oh, my heart bleeds to think the teen that I have turned you to was as from my remembrance. Please you farther. Prospero. My brother and thy uncle called Antonio, I pray thee mark me, that a brother should be so perfidious. He whom next thyself of all the world I loved, and to him put the manage of my state, as at that time, through all the signories, it was the first, and Prospero, the prime duke, being so reputed in dignity, and for the liberal arts without a parallel, those being all my study, the government I cast upon my brother, and to my state grew stranger, being transported and wrapped in secret studies, thy false uncle. Dost thou attend me? Miranda. Sir, most heedfully. Prospero. Being once perfected how to grant suits, how to deny them, who to advance, and who to trash for overtopping, new created the creatures that were mine, I say, or changed them, or else new formed them, having both the key of officer and office, set all hearts in the state, to what tune pleased his ear, that now he was the ivy which had hid my princely trunk, and sucked my verdure out of it. Thou attendest not. Miranda. Oh, good sir, I do. Prospero, I pray thee mark me. I thus neglecting worldly ends, all dedicated to closeness and the bettering of my mind, with that which, but by being so retired, overprized all popular rate in my false brother, awakened an evil nature in my trust, like a good parent I did beget of him, a falsehood in its contrary as great as my trust was, which had indeed no limit, a confidence sans bound. He being thus lorded, not only with what my revenue yielded, but what my power might else exact, like one who, having into truth by telling of it, made such a sinner of his memory, to credit his own lie, he did believe it. He was indeed the duke, out of the substitution, and executing the outward face of royalty, with all prerogative. Hence his ambition growing. Dost thou hear? Miranda. Your tale, sir, it would cure deafness. Prospero. To have no screen between this part he played, and him he played it, for he needs will be absolute Milan. Me, poor man, my library was dukedom large enough. Of temporal royalties he thinks me now incapable. Confederates, so dry he was for sway with King of Naples, to give him annual tribute, do him homage, subject his coronet to his crown, and bend the dukedom, yet unbowed. Alas, poor Milan, to most ignoble stooping. Miranda. Oh, the heavens. Prospero. Mark his condition and the event, then tell me if this might be a brother. Miranda. I should sin to think but nobly of my grandmother. Good wombs have borne bad sons. It really sucks to be smart and poor. Or another way to phrase this, and you may want to think of it this way if you're thinking about it at all. It really sucks to be a person who knows a whole lot about a whole lot, but is never able to turn that knowledge into gold. Or even another way of thinking about this, particularly with Prospero, is if you're so smart, why weren't you a better ruler? Prospero is set up in Shakespeare's The Tempest as a person who has been banished to an island, who is the rightful ruler of a kingdom, and yet he seems to fail to understand the basic parameters of dealing with other human beings. And because he fails to understand the basic parameters of how to deal with other human beings, he fails at the basics of interpersonal relationships, he is cast out of his own kingdom, which he was granted to rule by his brother. His brother, who understood interpersonal relationships better than Prospero did. How did Prospero respond to this? Well, he responded like someone who would be identified as a classic, perhaps gamma in the male social sexual hierarchy. He decided that instead of figuring out what the heck he had done wrong, instead he was going to double down. He was going to double down on the things that he did understand. He was going to double down on his strengths. He was going to double down on study. He was going to double down on books. He was going to double down on attaining secret knowledge. And in doing that, he was going to nurse his appetite for revenge and his desire for power above all else, while manipulating spirits, magic, and of course manipulating other people, including his daughter Miranda, as well as one of the denizens of the island he was dumped on, a gentleman or a monster, depending upon your perspective, named Caliban, to serve his own ends. Exiled to the island, he does what any wronged Gamma would do. He engineers an outcome using magic to bring the individuals who he believes have done him wrong to the island so that he can exact his revenge upon them. Unfortunately, he's leveraging forces he doesn't fully comprehend. Now, if all this seems very mystical, if all this seems very sort of not mechanical, if your engineering, modern industrial mind can't really wrap your arms around this idea that there might be spiritual forces in the world, well, don't worry. There's plenty of people who are manipulating or seeking to manipulate these forces in the world right now. And by the way, they have cell phones in their pocket, and they believe in evolution, and they believe that the earth goes around the sun. In our mechanical and post-industrial era, paganistic religious practices, and even the use of magic, still work and wind like yeast through our world today, being used by those for whom wealth, acquisition, and the ability to direct, either directly or indirectly, the lives of masses of others is still just not enough power. One of the things that you may want to note if you're a leader listening to this podcast is this. When leaders play with spiritual forces, dark or light, but let's focus on the dark ones for just a moment here. When leaders play with spiritual forces, they arrogantly believe will only serve them. They wind up falling for the deception of power, or the deception of some type of power that is, in reality, these forces having a control over them. You're not strong enough to wield dark forces. Neither was Prospero, by the way, and his greed and his manipulation and his appetite for revenge, well, Shakespeare knew that these things have power, both as motivators and have power to leverage massive downfalls. Speaking of which, we need to go back to the Tempest, back to William Shakespeare's The Tempest. Act 2, Scene 1 is where we're going to pick up. Now, we are jumping around. I am picking clips to make certain points, portions of the play today. I would encourage you to go and get the Folger Shakespeare Library edition of The Tempest. I would encourage you to read the entire play, and when you read it in its entirety, I would also encourage you to check out the analysis of the play. Most of which is really good, actually. And so go check that out. Go listen to that. Go watch that. There's a few things on YouTube that you can watch that are supportive of this. And of course, just as with any other Shakespeare production, I would encourage you to pick up the an audiobook version of The Tempest as well, because Shakespeare is meant to be performed. It is not merely meant to be read silently inside of your head. All right, back to the Tempest, Act 2, Scene 1. Again, we're jumping around here. I want to make a larger point here about, about politics. Enter Alonso, Sebastian, Antonio, Gonzalo, Adrian, Francisco, and others. By the way, these folks are now on the island. The shipwreck has occurred, and they are trying to gather their bearings. Gonzalo to Alonso, beseech you, sir, be merry. You have cause, so have we all, of joy, for our escape is much beyond our loss. Our hint of woe is common every day. Some sailor's wife, the masters of some merchant, and the merchant have just our theme of woe. But for the miracle, I mean our preservation, few in millions can speak like us. Then wisely, good sir, weigh our sorrow with our comfort. Alonso, prithee, peace. Sebastian, aside to Antonio, he receives comfort like cold porridge. Antonio, the visitor will not give him more or so. Sebastian, look, he's winding up the watch of his wit. By and by it will strike. Gonzalo to Alonso, sir. Sebastian, one, tell. Gonzalo, when every grief is entertained that's offered comes to the entertainer. Sebastian, $1. Gonzalo, dolor comes to him indeed. You have spoken truer than you purposed. Sebastian, you have taken it wiselier than I meant you should. Gonzalo to Alonso, therefore, my lord. Antonio, fie, what a spendthrift is he of his tongue. Alonso to Gonzalo, I prithee spare. Gonzalo, well, I have done, but yet. Sebastian aside to Antonio, he will be talking. Antonio aside to Sebastian, which of he or Adrian, for a good wager, first begins to crow? Sebastian, the old cock. Antonio, the cockerel. Sebastian, done, the wager. Antonio, a laughter. Sebastian, a match. Adrian, though this island seem to be desert. Antonio, Sebastian, so you're paid? Adrian, uninhabitable, and yet almost inaccessible. Sebastian, yet. Adrian, yet. Antonio, he could not miss it. Adrian, it must needs be of subtle, tender, and delicate temperance. Antonio, temperance was such a delicate wench. Sebastian, and a subtle, as he most learnedly delivered. Adrian, the air breathes upon us here most sweetly. Sebastian, as if it had lungs, and rotten ones. Antonio, or as if it were perfumed by a fen. Gonzalo, here is everything advantageous to life. Antonio, true, save means to live. Sebastian, of that there's none or little. Gonzalo, how lush and lusty the grass looks, how green. Antonio, the ground indeed is tawny. Sebastian, with an eye of green it. Antonio, he misses not much. Sebastian, no, he doth but mistake the truth totally. Gonzalo, but the rarity of it is, which is indeed almost beyond credit. Sebastian, as many vouched rarities are. Gonzalo, that our garments, being as they were drenched in the sea, hold notwithstanding their freshness and gloss, being rather new-dyed rather than stained with salt water. Antonio, but if one of his pockets could speak, would it not say he lies? Sebastian, or very falsely pocketed up his report. Gonzalo, methinks our garments are now as fresh as when we put them first in Afric, at the marriage of the king's fair daughter Claribel to the king of Tunis. Sebastian, 'twas a sweet marriage, and we prosper well on our return. Adrian, Tunis was never graced before with such a paragon to their queen. Gonzalo, not since widow Dido's time. Antonio, widow? A pox on that. How came that widow in it? Widow Dido? Sebastian, what if he had said widower, Aeneas too? Good Lord, how you take it. Adrian to Gonzalo, widow Dido, said you? You make me study of that. She was of Carthage, not of Tunis. Gonzalo, this is Tunis, sire. It was Carthage. Carthage? Adrian, Carthage? Gonzalo, I assure you Carthage. Antonio, his word is more than the miraculous harp. Sebastian, he hath raised the wall, and houses too. Antonio, what impossible matter will he make easy next? Sebastian, I think he will carry this island home in his pocket and give it to his son for an apple. Antonio, and sowing the kernels of it in the sea, bring forth more islands. Gonzalo. Antonio, why in good time? Gonzalo to Alonso, sir, we were talking that our garments now seem as fresh as they were when we were at Tunis, at the marriage of your daughter, who is now a queen. Antonio, and the rarest that e'er came there. Sebastian, bait, I beseech you, widow Dido. Antonio, widow Dido, widow Dido. Gonzalo, to Alonso. Is not, sir, my doublet as fresh as the first day I wore it? I mean, in a sort? Antonio, that sort was well fished for. Gonzalo to Alonso. When I wore it at your daughter's marriage. Alonso, you cram these words into mine ears against the stomach of my sense. Would I have never married my daughter there, for coming thence my son is lost, and, in my rate, she too, who is so far from Italy removed, I ne'er shall see her again. O thou mine heir of Naples and of Milan, what strange fish hath made this meal on thee? Francisco, sire, he may live. I saw him beat the surges under him and ride upon their backs. He trod the water, whose enmity he flung aside, and breasted the surge most swole and met him. His bold head 'bove the contentious waves he kept, and oared himself with his good arms in lusty stroke to the shore, that o'er his wave-worn basis bowed. As stooping to relieve him, I no doubt, he came alive to land. Alonso, no, he's gone. Sebastian, sir, you may thank yourself for this great loss, that would not bless our Europe with your daughter, but rather lose her to an African, where she at least is banished from your eye, who hath cause to whet the grief on it. Alonso, prithee peace. Sebastian, you were kneeled to and importuned otherwise by all of us, and the fair soul herself weighed between loathness and obedience, at which and Orobim should bow. We have lost your son, I fear, forever. Milan and Naples have more widows in them of this business making than we bring men to comfort them. The fault's your own. Alonso, so is the dearest of the loss. Gonzalo, my lord Sebastian, the truth you speak doth lack some gentleness, and time to speak it in. You rub the sore when you should bring the plaster. Remember what I just said. Recall what I just said before that little piece there about Prospero, right? If you're so smart, why aren't you in charge, right? Well, the other character, the character of Alonso, has a little bit of a different problem. Alonso's problem is that politics cares very much about him. In particular, the politics of hereditary succession. And when Alonso loses his son due to the actions of Prospero, who generated the storm that wrecked the ship, King Alonso, he winds up with having a little bit of a problem. He winds up in a space where all of the familial considerations of the death of his hereditary heir to the throne now run up against the political considerations of the death of a hereditary heir. In our time, where we don't think too much about hereditary heirs, but we think very much about political behavior, in our time, this reads a little bit weird to us, but there is something innate in it that we definitely understand. We are at a time in the West when political behavior has now replaced religious belief, but it was not always so. This is why the Tempest mixes mystical and religious elements with elements of politics and law and culture, and it layers them in. And by the way, I haven't even addressed the issue of the harpies or the aspects of Caliban and the natural world. You're going to have to read more in the play about that. This is not the first time that Shakespeare has played around with the conceptions for his 17th century audience of political machinations and how those machinations eventually wind up with real-world events. But in the 17th century, when the divine right of kings was just beginning to be questioned, people were looking at and people were beginning to consider that maybe it wasn't just the elites that had problems with politics. Maybe it was regular people as well. Shakespeare wrote, of course, the definitive plays about political machinations and manipulations, sort of raw and wriggling, right, in their purest form, in Julius Caesar, who we've covered on a previous podcast, Macbeth, and, of course, Richard III. I'm sorry, not Macbeth, no, Hamlet, and Richard III. But in our time, even though these stories resonate with us because we can see political machinations in our own time, at our own level, and as democracy, of course, has increased, as the demos has grown, as the door has opened more and more to give agency to the individuals in the masses, people are still, weirdly enough, even with all that, people are still weirdly enough caught by surprise when political behavior impacts their interpersonal and personal decision-making processes, and even the direction of what they consider to be their uneventful lives. This is a factor, that surprise is a factor of the human condition. I don't really know why people are surprised by politics. I've been involved one way or another in either thinking about, acting in, contributing, or participating in politics and political events and political activities since I was 15 years old. And that's been for the past 30 years. I anticipate I'll probably be doing that till the end of my time because politics does matter. And yet, the number of people that I run into who are absolutely stunned by political activity and the impact that political activity has on their average life, even at the local level, is kind of amazing. No matter how stern the warning, people seem to forget that while you may not care about politics individually cares very much about you. And Alonzo and Prospero and Miranda and Gonzalo and even Caliban in the Tempest, well, they get to experience directly how much politics cares very deeply about them. There's a leader for lessons here that they would do well to pay attention to. Wrapping up here with The Tempest, how do you stay on the path with a play as multi-layered, multifaceted, and multi-leveled as The Tempest by William Shakespeare? By the way, not one of his more popular plays. It tends to be ranked either in the third tier or even sometimes in the high end of the second tier of his plays, but it is definitely one that is worthwhile for leaders to read. There are three main ideas that leaders can take from The Tempest and can use these ideas to stay on the leadership path. First is that leaders don't mess around with tools they don't understand, from magic to propaganda. Look, if you don't know what you're doing with a tool, what are you doing with it in your hands? And if a tool is being used against you, it is incumbent upon you to learn how it is being used, but it is not incumbent upon you to use it on someone else. Leaders know that politics are everywhere, and they work assiduously to manage politics like the weeds, or the weed that it is. Some weeds are beneficial. Sometimes politics works. Some weeds are merely invasive. If you let them get out of control, they'll take over your entire organization and your culture. Politics is everywhere, interpersonal, extrapersonal. There's no way around it, but putting it in its appropriate space and managing it in the hierarchy of people and of power is incredibly important. Not everything is political, just like everything is not religious or everything is not entertainment, but we do need to figure out what things are what, where, as leaders. And finally, leadership in and of itself is a call to adventure. It's a call to the high seas or to the high desert. We should heed that call as leaders, and we should be willing to strike out into unknown areas, explore strange new worlds, and to, of course, seek out things that we have not seen before. Will there be other folks there? Will it be inhabited? Will there be people who have made decisions or have opinions or be operating with facts that we don't recognize? Absolutely. And we should be prepared for whatever it is that we find when we get there. If we apply these 3 lessons, we can stay on the path with The Tempest by William Shakespeare. And well, with that, I'm out.
Thank you for listening to the Leadership Lessons from the Great Books podcast today. And now that you've made it this far, you should subscribe to the audio version of this show on all the major podcast players, including Apple iTunes, Spotify, YouTube Music, and everywhere else where podcasts are available. There's also a video version of our podcast on our YouTube channel. Like and subscribe to the video version of this podcast on the Leadership Toolbox channel on YouTube. Just search for Leadership Toolbox and hit the subscribe button there on YouTube. And while you're doing that, leave a 5-star review if you like what we're doing here on Apple, Spotify, and YouTube. Just go below the player and hit 5 stars. We need those reviews to grow, and it's the easiest way to help grow this show. And tell all your friends, of course, in leadership. By the way, if you don't like what we're doing here, well, you can always listen to another leadership show. There are several other good ones out there. At least that's what I've heard. All right. Well, that's it for me.